Canada is committed to removing barriers to women's participation and growth in all spheres of life and ensuring non-discrimination on the basis of gender. Canada works with government and civil society partners as part of our feminist foreign policy, which flows from our long-standing commitment to upholding human rights, gender equality, and the rules-based international order. I'm glad to be getting started. Good evening from Delhi and good morning to those of you that are joining us from Canada. I am very happy to welcome you to the first ever Canada-India Media Celebrity Chat. This is a unique event and we really aim to build bridges between the media communities in Canada, India, Nepal, and Bhutan. And I am very pleased to say that we have participants from the media of all of these countries joining us today. And of course, we are joined by two exceptional leaders from the Canadian and Indian media as our star panel members. I'm pleased to take a few moments as we get started to say a few words about why we're hosting this event today. And although the media sector in each country is unique, there are certainly commonalities between them. And today, the event aims to provide a platform to exchange ideas and best practices to further enrich the media in our respective countries. Canada is committed to promoting media freedom and freedom of expression. And we do that because we believe that a free and vibrant media is an important constituent of any healthy democracy. And there are a few different ways that we are exercising that promotion. At the international level, Canada co-hosted the first ever global conference for media freedom with the United Kingdom in 2019 and with Botswana in 2020 to provide a platform for dialogue between journalists, civil society, and governments. And here in South Asia, we've partnered with numerous organizations and top editor-level journalists in India, Nepal, and Bhutan to host capacity building workshops. Now, these workshops are online and in person, and they're providing opportunities for members of the media from across the subcontinent to exchange ideas on themes like women's equal participation in the media sector, the importance of diversity and inclusion, media and the rights of LGBTIQ communities, the role of the media in protecting the environment, and most recently, the impact of COVID-19 on the media. In 2020, Canada and the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative hosted a South Asia Regional Media Roundtable, and last year, Canada supported CHRI's project to study challenges faced by the media in Northeast India, which was specifically targeted to benefit female journalists. And I would just like to say as we carry on that it is a pleasure to not only have people members of the media joining us, but also canine members here who are most welcome. And I particularly like the pink t-shirt. I think that that's fantastic and it speaks to girl power. So welcome to the puppy as well. Moving on, let's talk about why we're here. Gender equality and fair representation across the gender spectrum continues to be a challenge in the media sector all around the world, even in countries where there is a robust media. It does not necessarily mean that there are no challenges in the sector. And according to a recent report by the Reuters Institute, in 12 major markets where 40% of all journalists are women, women nonetheless only occupied 22% of the top editorial positions. And equal representation in senior positions is important for practical reasons, but also for symbolic reasons, because of a lack of diversity at the highest levels can result in skewing of the story. It's an inadequate understanding of events and an inability to assess their impact on those who are affected by them. For example, major global events like the COVID-19 pandemic that we're living through now, or climate change, have an unprecedented impact for everyone, but the impact on women is compounded many times over because of other disadvantages that women are already facing. And that's why it is so crucial to empower women in journalism as equal partners in shaping a vibrant and free media across the world. So today, I'm very much looking forward to speaking with two distinguished leaders who've achieved a seat at the decision-making table through their talent, hard work, and commitment. And I am honored to introduce our esteemed panelists, Shereen Bhan and Adrienne Batra. Shereen Bhan is the managing editor of CNBC TV 18. She has for many years been producing and anchoring flagship award-winning broadcast shows like India Business Hour and Young Turks. She's been responsible for breaking a range of news stories that have redefined the Indian economic landscape in recent times. She's interviewed some of the biggest names in business and politics and has won numerous awards for her leadership and reporting skills. Adrienne Batra is the editor-in-chief of the Toronto Sun and 24 Hours Toronto. She has years of experience of reporting and anchoring news shows, and until recently, hosted her own TV show on the Sun News Network. She's appeared on Fox Business News, CNN, and BBC, has worked in politics, and has served in the Canadian Armed Forces. She also has won several awards for her work as a journalist. And on behalf of the Canadian High Commission, I welcome both of you and the members of our audience to this event. We're very privileged to have you with us and grateful that you're taking the time for what we think is a very important and timely discussion. Now, we're here today to talk about the role of women in the media when it comes to reporting and decision-making. Both of you have achieved tremendous success in journalism, and you've risen to powerful and influential positions. And of course, such a journey is never easy. It takes drive and it takes commitment. So to start our discussion, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you each had to overcome to get where you are today. Can I perhaps first turn the floor to Shereen?
Thanks so much. It's such an absolute privilege to be part of this conversation. And thank you for getting me to have this conversation here with Adrienne on this platform. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much for inviting me. I have to first acknowledge my privilege because I've been very fortunate and lucky to not have to face the challenges of having to battle patriarchy at home. I've had a very supportive family, and they were absolutely okay with the decisions that I made in my life, including the decision to get into broadcast journalism. And this is not the case for a lot of women, including women, particularly in our part of the world across South Asia. And I think that is a crucial challenge. So, your dreams get nipped in the bud, so to speak, even before you can start out in the workforce. And then I was lucky to be part of the broadcast journalism industry. And television, as you know, is a relatively newer business as opposed to the print media. So it's about 25 plus years old in India. And so it was a little easier for women to move up the ranks. And I was fortunate to have mentors who gave us an equal platform, who gave us the opportunities without sort of putting us through the gender lens or without discriminating on account of gender. So we were fortunate to have an environment which was collaborative and have a system where hierarchy was not straitjacketed, and we were allowed to sort of grow. And I have to say that I've put in 200% over the last 21 years that I've been here at CNBC TV 18. Perhaps I can debate whether my ability to say no at the start of my career. I never said no. I took on every responsibility and every job that came my way. That also added to my versatility. But I just at that point in time felt like, let me try and do as much as I possibly can. And I think that helped me in my journey along the way. So I have been very, very fortunate to not have had to face as many challenges moving forward in my career. So on the decision-making side, I think it's been different because there are very few women, as you rightly point out, not so much in editorial leadership roles, but in management roles. And I think that continues to be a big problem across both the print as well as television media in India. So those are my initial comments. I've had it a lot easier than most women. It's been a lot of work, but I have to say that I didn't face some of the challenges that many women do face as they go about doing this business in India.
Thanks, Shereen. I think it's particularly interesting what you say about moving into a decision-making role and the distinction, the difference that happens at that point. And we'll maybe talk a little bit more about that as we carry on in our chat. Adrienne, can you share with us some of your perspectives?
Well, it's good morning here from me in snowy Toronto, and I want to thank the High Commission for having such an esteemed panel, and I'm so privileged to be part of this very significant conversation that I think people everywhere are having. I think if the pandemic has taught us anything, and which is ongoing lessons, I suppose, it's that we need to truly reflect upon who we are, what we are doing, what we're doing with our lives. And in the media world, we are sort of at the forefront of that, particularly as we move back into some semblance of normalcy. I know I'm certainly going to be looking around my newsroom and wondering, as we report on stories coming out of the pandemic, who is reflective of that? Who is going to be able to tell stories and tell our readers what matters to them and how that matters to them? Sort of rewinding the tape on myself at the risk of aging myself, but I was born and raised in Canada. Parents, of course, are from India. There's a different sort of mentality with immigrants and being raised here. I was raised in a very small province, the province of Saskatchewan, and predominantly white. But we were very fortunate. I mean, extremely supportive parents, extremely supportive communities. But me pivoting into the world of politics and then journalism, I can tell you there weren't a lot of people who looked like me in those worlds, and it wasn't a deterrent by any means. I had extraordinarily strong mentors, and people who sort of helped bring me along in my career. But like Shereen, she said something so significant and so important: don't say no. And there's opportunities that are very few and far between in the media world. It doesn't matter what medium of journalism you're in, it's shrinking. And so there are going to be opportunities that come by and you may think, oh, not good enough. I'm too good for that, or that's not what I want to do. Give it a try. You would be shocked at just one step through a door with your world of media, your journey, and where it can take you. For me, I was working in the mayor's office. Fast forward 11 years later, I have the privilege of running one of the largest newspapers in the country. So you never know where things can take you. But also, don't be afraid to work collaboratively with people. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I find so many of the panels that I do, and the connections that I make after the fact, are predominantly young women asking the same question you've asked, Amanda. How did you get there? How did you do it? There's no secret formula. There's no magic bullet. There's no roadmap. It can be a bit messy and a bit, you can trip a few times. But I would only say that support mechanisms help, particularly at home, but also not being afraid to take a chance.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adrienne. You both mentioned something that I think is really interesting. You talked about how important it is to have supportive people around you, whether that's your families or others who've supported you in your career. And I think that really speaks to the fact that people need to be supported, they need to be mentored, and they need to see people, perhaps people who represent them, people who can be those mentors for them through their careers. And I think probably today, we're seeing more and more women like yourselves in prominent roles who can act as mentors and can be an inspiration to people starting out. How would you characterize the role of women from the sort of the Canadian perspective and the Indian perspective, the role of women in the newsroom today, and particularly with respect to decision making? If perhaps Adrienne, you can start this one.
So I work, the Toronto Sun is part of the largest newspaper chain across Canada called Post Media. And it's only sort of happened in the last, I'd say, 5 to 6 years, but many of our flagship papers are run by women. And it's not been from a diversity program or an equity program. It's just because they earned that position. They earned their role in the newsroom. And what I'm proud about is the fact that they are being recognized for their leadership role and given the role as editor-in-chief, for example. So that's in the print world. Now, I can speak to some of my peers in broadcast journalism. Many of the managing editors, many of those the executive editors are women. And so I think that the complexion, as it were, the demographic is shifting. It's changing. We started out with this sort of age group of particularly men. Most of them are retiring. Most of them are leaving, and so it's making room for those that have been brought up in the newsroom, in broadcast, for example, even in radio. So I think that there are. Even though I said that the media opportunities, we're a shrinking industry in many ways, there are still opportunities for growth and leadership. It's just, you have to earn it, and you have to show that you have the ability to do so. The skills are so different now too. As Shereen probably knows, you need the soft skills, you need the hard skills, you need the editorial skills, you need the ability to make decisions quickly. There's so many things that have to happen and then at the same time, you have to manage a lot of people, which, by the way, I find most of my time doing is managing people versus doing editing. So when you get to certain, you sort of almost, careful what you wish for, because I don't get to nearly do it as much as the editorial side as I used to be able to. But that said, there is significant growth opportunity, I think, for women in the industry. As others, it's sad to say that others have to leave in order for us to get those chances, but that's just part of a function of the system.
Thanks, Adrienne. Shereen, what do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree there with Adrienne. I think, if I can speak about what we have been able to do here at CNBC TV 18, if you talk about our executive editor, you talk about our banking editor, you talk about our technology editor, you talk about our pharma editor, they're all women. And again, this is not sort of a result of the fact that we've tried to put women in those positions, but it's just that we've allowed the newsroom to operate based on merit. And these are people who happen to be women who've earned that position. And so as long as you reward merit, as long as you reward the best person for the job, and if that person happens to be a woman, then so be it. And that's what we've encouraged. We've encouraged people to do more. We've encouraged people to go out there and explore various aspects of their professional, explore their professional canvas, so to speak. And so we've really put the best people in the job, and in many of these cases, they happen to be women. But I think while a lot of this has happened organically, we've also had to make some pretty strategic decisions. And I think sometimes companies do things that are well-intentioned, well-meaning, but actually have the opposite impact. I'll give you one example. For instance, a couple of years ago, and media industries have been focused on cutting their budgets down because we've gone through a difficult period, especially over the last few years. And in keeping with that, the policy was that, look, if you're out on an assignment after 10 p.m. at night, then you will not have access to an official car, etc. You will have to rely on public transportation, get an Uber or whatever the case may be. But if you happen to be a woman out on an assignment post 10 p.m. at night, then you will have access to an official car. Now, my argument was that you are then systematically putting an editor in a position saying, okay, I need to worry about the cost, and so I will not send a woman out on that assignment. So it was well-meaning on the part of the organization to try and think about safety, but what you were actually doing is denying women the opportunity to get the kind of assignments that they should be doing. So I think when it comes to things like this, there has to be equal opportunities for both men and women, and organizations need to think of costs without the gender lens, because that in fact has the reverse impact, and it denies women, it holds women back. So I think these are things that we need to be mindful of. The other thing that I'm particularly proud of, and we've seen this happen.
Shereen, I think that we've lost your sound. I'm not sure if our tech folks can give us a hand with this.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, great. I don't know where you lost me, but let me just go back a couple of seconds. When you see women take off on their maternity leave, either they drop out altogether, or if they do come back into the newsroom, they take on a much more diminished role because the organization is not willing to be as flexible or as accommodative or as supportive as I think we need to be. And I'm very proud to say that we actually haven't had a single instance where we've seen somebody take off on maternity leave and not come back. In fact, they've come back and gone on to achieving leadership positions. And that is because the entire organization has rallied behind them. So we've established this very collaborative, supportive environment where we want the woman to know that she is valued, she's appreciated. And just because she's made a life choice that involves taking time off from the newsroom, it doesn't mean that we doubt the commitment to return and add value to the organization. So these are just some of the examples where I believe it's important for us as leaders, especially, to think about the policies that we put in place and how we execute them every day to try and ensure that we do have an inclusive and diverse workforce in a newsroom.
Can I just add something to that, Amanda? I think that's such a key element. So as you can see, it's very early in the morning here, and you'll see various people of my family coming in and out because we're getting ready for the day. It's very early. My son just went off to school. The dog's going to leave soon, but I'm still working from home, and I'm still a mom, and I'm still a wife, and I'm still running my household. I'm still a pet parent. I'm still, the editor-in-chief. I'm still the commentator on TV. I'm still all of those things, right? But yet I still have to be able to make sure that the newspaper front page gets done on time, that we meet press deadlines, that staff is safe with all these rallies going on. I need to make sure that my team is safe and they are doing their job. And so I have all these checklists of things that I need to do. So I'm cognizant of the fact that for many of my female team, many of my reporters and columnists that are women, they too have that giant checklist of things that they have to do. And so interestingly, as we move towards working from home back to transitioning into the office, it's my female employees that are saying, can I please get back to the office? I need to get away from home. I'm doing everything. And so I think that's indicative of how sort of the pandemic, in a way, I know I'm shifting a bit, has played out for women. It's had a far more adverse impact on women than it has on men. In many cases, because women are small business owners and they lost their source of revenue from the lockdowns or whatever the case may be. But I just want to sort of just add that, from a manager's perspective, I think I, being in a similar position, am far more cognizant of all of the additional things that the female columnist has to do, for example, versus others, in addition to filing her copy on time, and it better be good, it better be front page material, she has to get the kids off to school, and there's so many working parts. So I meant what I said earlier, that it's not just about being, the editor and sort of coming down on people and making sure everything is done properly. That's important, of course, but it's also about recognizing the change in not only the demographics of your newsroom, but the human side to it. I don't want it to sound too squishy, but it's an important component because you want to keep your people too. Yeah.
And you raise an important point here, Adrienne, about how much any individual brings to their job, not only their professional responsibilities, but everything from around their perspective that goes into that. And you talk about it as a manager, but I wonder how you think that the representation of women in journalism, and as you both mentioned, the increasing representation of women at high levels in journalism, how do you think that has affected media coverage, or that it's affecting media coverage?
I don't think that it affects media coverage directly. Now, what it does is perhaps focus attention on different way of storytelling. There might be a different perspective that is brought forward. There is a different sort of area of stories that could be brought forward. I'll give you a small example. I have had an employee who was part of the LGBTQ community. And this individual brought a unique story perspective to our pages at a time when there was one of the biggest news stories happening in Canada was a manhunt for a alleged killer in the gay community. And so what the employee was able to do was go into that community, tell their stories, whereas someone who wasn't part of that wasn't able to do so. So what she really brought to our pages and brought to our readers and brought to the story was a new perspective and a unique perspective that perhaps otherwise wouldn't have been there. That's just one small example, but that certainly focused our attention to recognize that there was something very serious and legitimate going on in a community that often doesn't get the spotlight, Shauna, is not often given the spotlight fairly.
Shereen, how do you think that's manifesting in the Indian news media?
Well, I'm not going to generalize and speak about the Indian news media. Let me talk a little bit about what we've been able to do here at CNBC. And I've been the managing editor now for about a decade or so. So I think the way that I have looked at programming is different from the way that it was done previously. And I don't know if it's entirely to do with the fact that that it's a woman now leading the newsroom, but I think it does have a little bit of a role to play. I think the way that I look at business news is not just as an assessment or a review of a corporate balance sheet. It's not just about stock market capitalization and how much wealth has been created or how much of wealth has been eroded. I think the way that I have looked at business news, and that's been my attempt over the past decade, is to really expand how we see business news. When we talk about healthcare, why is that not business news? When we talk about education, why is that not business news? When we talk about learning loss, why is that not something that will impact the economic future of this country? And I think that is how I've tried to sort of expand the way that people relate to business news or access business news or imagine what business news is likely to be. So I think the choices that we've made, just in terms of the reach of our programming, the variety of our programming, women's issues didn't really get much focus and much coverage. But and I think that does have to do with the fact that I take those issues seriously, and perhaps I give that more time on air because I take it more seriously. But outside of that, I think that I truly believe that that our content needs to be relevant to the audience, and I think that's a larger existential issue for media in general. Are we really relevant to our readers, to our viewers today? Are we suffering from the danger of telling a single story? Have we become echo chambers where only one kind of narrative, one kind of stereotyping, easy, lazy labeling is going on? And I think those are questions that as leaders in the media, we need to answer. And I do believe that there is an existential crisis at this point in time across newsrooms, not just in India, but across the world. And I think it is incumbent on us as leaders in the newsroom to address these issues, to understand what's really going on, because we will diminish our relevance if we don't address these issues head on.
Yeah, trust in media is at an all-time low again, and that's a very real challenge. And forget who's ever in charge of your newsroom or who's ever the newsroom leader. It behooves all of us to sort of look inward. Certain elections, certain presidents getting elected have taught us hard lessons. The way the pandemic has been covered has taught us all hard lessons. And frankly, social media has changed so much for our industry. Certainly on the print side, I often say, we've been Ubered because there was no way we could keep up with what Google's and Facebook's can offer us. Can offer people. There's just absolutely no way, and there's no way we can try to even keep up. So to the broader point I think that Shereen was making is with respect to where we are as an industry, and then for anybody that's on this call or even entertaining the idea of going into the world of journalism, that's a very real part of the conversation of who we are and what we are doing, what our role is. If we perpetually have it wrong, and I don't mean a story wrong. I just mean we don't read the room and the temperature in the room. We don't read the temperature of your country, of your protesters or whatever, or of a presidency. It really, people vote with their dollars, and they won't tune in. They will not buy the paper. They will turn off the radio. So as much as I know we all want to give excellent journalism and excel in telling the story, the right story, you know, being right rather than first, all of those things. You know, it's a business as well. You know, my company has shareholders, and you know, I don't want to be too cold about it, but these are other realities that you have to consider.
I'd like to follow up on a couple of things that you've said. Adrienne, you were talking about the impact of the pandemic and how it impacted your female staff differently to the others. And I have a question from the audience about how Corona has increased the gender-based pay gap. So the question from the audience is, I'll read it out. And I wonder if you could maybe give us your views. While work from home is a boon to several women employees, many were forced to quit from the workforce. The lockdown taught us what is core to life. How can this learning be extended to improve pay as well as create a more balanced workplace supporting women?
The Chamber of Commerce, which I'm sure you have in all of your communities for everybody that's joined us, the province of Ontario has the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and they came out with a study throughout, I think it was about a year or so into the pandemic. Gosh, I mean, it's been 3 calendar years, but this would have been 2021. And they talked about something called the she session, and that the country is going to likely go into some semblance of a recession because of the inordinate amount of wealth that was lost during the nearly 4-5 lockdowns we had in our province and in our country. And how it was going to be women that are going to be the ones that are going to get us out of it. They're going to be the small business owners. They're going to be the job creators. They are going to be the ones that sort of pivot away from, you know, perhaps the traditional roles and look at doing something different in terms of what their own career is, being it through skills trade or whatever the case may be. But with respect to the pay equity gap, like, it's hard for me to talk about that in the context of my line of work, because we do have a union, and that kind of you know, addresses some of that. But you know, the pay equity issue is an ongoing in all sorts of sectors. You know, there's a reality when women do leave the workforce for 2 or 3 years for personal reasons, if they're going to raise families and stuff, you know, those are business decisions, fairly or unfairly made, that are decided upon in terms of, I mean, we don't need to litigate all of that here, but just more broadly, I think on women coming back and women in the workforce, this is, you know, we're the nearly 52%. And it's about damn time we said it. And so, you know, it's just smart business sense for enterprise to look at, you know, having women around their table, being at a corporate board or being in the newsroom or being in you know, any position. We bring dollars with us, we bring resources with us, we bring ingenuity with us. And frankly, it's just economic sense to have women there.
Maybe follow up as well on something that Shereen said about security of women in the workplace and security out covering stories. We have a question as well from the audience on this, but I'm wondering, you mentioned as well that the increasing use of social media in the media space. And we know that women, particularly women in the public eye, are often faced with a lot of hostility and abuse in social media. And I'm wondering if you can give us your views on what does that mean specifically for women in journalism? And what does it mean for women's voices? And then the question from the media is, or from the audience, sorry, is what can be done more broadly to improve security for women journalists in the course of their work, including both cybersecurity and physical security?
Okay.
Well, I think the answer, is it me or Shereen? Did you want to address?
Let's start with Shereen and then we'll go to Adrienne.
Yeah, please. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So I think, you know, the intimidation that women journalists and women in general with an opinion face in social media online is real. This is a real challenge. It's a real threat, and it is disproportionately higher for women. You know, and I think because of the anonymity that social media provides you, it's just easier for people to go after you and say the nastiest things possible without any accountability or without any consequence. And I think what is imperative now is for organizations to get serious about taking this through, to follow up, file complaints, whether it is with the online platforms or it is in fact law enforcement. I think we need to get serious about this. For too long we've had this attitude of, okay, block the person, forget about it. But this is real, and it is real harassment that you face every day, and it does bother you. I mean, I don't necessarily have the stomach to get onto Twitter and read nasty stuff about myself or people going at me. It weighs on your mind. It does impact the work that you do. It does force you to second guess what you're going to say. It does force you to look behind your shoulder constantly, and it is a weight that you carry with you. It is a burden that you carry with you, and I think time has come now for us to acknowledge it, call it out, and for organizations to stand by their employees, men or women. But as I said, it's disproportionately higher for women, the abuse that we face online, and to go after these people, file the complaints, go to law enforcement if need be. And I think enough is enough, because the intention is very clear. The intention is to intimidate. The intention is to silence. The intention is to get people to not voice their opinion or not go after a story or not go public with the facts and hold people to account. So I think it is absolutely imperative that whether it is just civil society or it is corporations, we need to ensure that there is safety online. And of course, as far as physical safety is concerned, I'm very clear. The standards have to be same for the men as well as the women, because otherwise you are going to ensure that the women are kept away from the jobs that they should rightfully be out there doing. I mean, I remember, for instance, during the course of the farmers' protests, and we had the farmers' protests on in India for about 18 months. Now, if I were to think about the fact that, look, it's not going to be a place that I send a woman reporter to, I'm denying my then rural affairs editor, who happened to be a woman, to cover the biggest story of recent times. So we have to ensure that when we talk about physical security, the standards are the same, irrespective of gender, because otherwise there will continue to be discrimination and women just will not get the opportunity to go out there and cover those stories.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shereen. Adrienne, please.
Well, my first bit of advice would be take a Twitter holiday. It's a horrible place. I know that a lot of my employees have said, I don't like it. It's nasty. I don't, but they also know it's a very functional part of their current job. And sadly, as much as it frustrates me and probably Shereen too, stories break on Twitter, and then you're scrambling, and then you're finding, okay, well, what's this? What's the Star saying? What's the CBC saying? Okay, what's the Sun saying? It's this weird curated place of in news gathering. Yet it is probably one of the most toxic places ever, anywhere. And I also find it's a bit of an echo chamber. But that all said, we are going through massive challenges. I know I could go through my Twitter feed, and Shereen could probably go through her Twitter feed, and it will never be about what we said, even though we're both women with opinions, very strong opinions, I suspect. It will never be about what we said. It will never be about, the angle that we took. It will be about, I don't like this about your hair. I don't like the way you talk. I don't like this. It's always a physical teardown of women, I find. And then, of course, of all the other various and sundry things, you're unintelligent, you're this, you're that, like horrible things, like things I would never even whisper in the dark to a stranger. Like, it's extraordinary to me, the things that people say on Twitter. And yeah, sure, you can block, you can do this, but I can tell you what we do. We've had very real, credible threats. I mean, half these people aren't very smart anyway, and they use their real name and their real Twitter handle and their real email address. And so we have, in many instances, had to call the police. I had one columnist who tends to be a bit of a firebrand. The sort of left side of the other side of the political spectrum found out where she lived and published her address. I mean, these are the sorts of real things that journalists have to contend with. And regardless of whatever political side of the aisle you're on, it doesn't matter. This is a polarized world. It's a polarized nation in our country right now. You're with them or you're against them. One of the things that we have recently done, Amanda, with Postmedia is we've done a sort of a survey of all of our employees, asking about this very like name, online harassment, et cetera. Managers have to take a very active role in ensuring the safety, health and safety of their staff. And then, of course, when staff complains, don't just let them say, "Oh, don't worry about it, it's just part of the job." No, it's not just part of the job. Sure, you're going to take some abuse. Sure, you're going to take some crap for sure. But a direct threat, a threat to your person, a threat to your family, a threat to all these things. No, that's very real. That's why you do get the police involved. The only other last point I will make on this one for any other newsroom leaders that are on this call, one of the things that we are looking at is we find that in the commenting. So say, for example, on your story online, you have comments that you can, and it's an open forum because we believe in freedom of speech, but maybe there's some stories that don't deserve a comment, like don't deserve commenting. So proactively shutting off comments on certain stories could also save your staff some grief.
Thanks very much for that. I have a couple of follow-up questions. You talked about a survey of your staff. Was it borne out in your survey of your staff that women are disproportionately experiencing more of this? And what do you think do you think that your male staff are cognizant of this? And what do you think is necessary to sensitize all of our colleagues to the challenges and the realities of this? You both talked again about the importance of having partners, supporters, and I think that's across the spectrum, men and women supporting the development of women. What needs to be done to make sure that that our male colleagues understand what the reality is for their women journalist colleagues?
You want me to go first?
So, yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, I think we just have to engage in an open conversation, and I think we have to be honest about what's going on, honest about the expectations, and I think we also need to have some very clear policies in place about how we engage online. I mean, I'm very clear. Don't engage with someone who's trying to troll. Don't sort of take the bait, so to speak, because it's only going to escalate. And as Adrienne was pointing out, I mean, there's no point getting into a mudslinging match on Twitter. It achieves absolutely nothing. So I think we need to be clear about how we engage online as well. And as far as our male colleagues are concerned, I think they're very cognizant, they're very sensitive, and they're very aware of the challenges that their female colleagues face as well. And it's important for us to have these conversations openly and to have a dialogue in the newsroom so that everyone is aware of what we're dealing with. So I think that's how we've addressed this issue so far.
Sometimes in contentious sort of situations, Amanda, we will send out a team, say it's a female reporter and the photographer will be male. We find they're very protective of their colleagues, but I think that the men are acutely aware of what, and actually maybe this is part of the difference, that me being the leader in the newsroom, I actually talk about these things. We do regular town halls because that's the only way we can communicate with each other, because we haven't seen each other in real life in almost 3 years. We have regular town halls and we talk about these sorts of things. We'll be going through the results of the employee survey. I couldn't give you the breakdown of male female because it was anonymous, but you can sort of glean from the answers who's answering predominantly in what way or the other. But I also hear it directly from them. They're like, "Oh, I'm just deleting my account." I'm like, it's your prerogative. It's not you don't have to have a Twitter account in order to work at the Toronto Sun. It's not a job requirement. It's helpful, but it's not a job requirement. So some just have proactively chosen to step away from it. Right now, akin to the Punjabi farmers that were having their protests over a year ago, we have protests that have broken out all across Canada. In nice little Canada, we have bridges being blockaded and the capital city being occupied, and all of these sorts of things going on. And I had male colleagues say, "I don't want to go because I don't want to get into a tussle." Fortunately, for the most part, they have all remained very peaceful, the protests, I should add. But I sometimes find that it is the women that are like, I know I can do this story. Yeah. I'm going in. But we do so with a health and safety guide that we remind them of before they step into a situation. We give them all the tools that they would need to cover the story safely, properly, and to protect themselves. It's not perfect. We've had assaults, we've had various things have happened, but then we went through the proper course of action to deal with it. I think media has to be very careful about not becoming the story themselves. And when you become the story yourself, then you lose some of your credibility. So I think if you give your staff the tools and to go out there and cover the story safely and smartly, you can mitigate a lot of these issues.
Yeah. And I would just agree with that. I think that is very, very crucial. And that is something that, I try and drive through our newsroom as well. We are not the story. We're out there trying to tell a story, and don't become the story yourself. I think we're seeing too much of the shift happen to the other side, where it's actually the journalists who are becoming the story. So I think we need to guard against that as well, and ensure that we're out there actually telling the story and not becoming the story.
Yeah.
Do you think that that is a product of at the same time as the polarization that you've been talking about?
I think in part there's an element to that for sure. But there's also an element to journalists where, we are the fifth estate, and we have a sense of, we are the public's eyes and ears, and there's a sense of responsibility when it comes to that. And maybe it's self-aggrandized, I don't know, but I think my only real point that I want to make is we have to be cautious of it in this day and age, in part because of the polarization, perhaps, or maybe we've always been polarized. Maybe it's just so far more pronounced because of platforms. I'm not going to blame social media for everything. It's just it really brings it out, because now you have a forum to talk to. In 15 years ago, people would see Shereen on TV and never be able to communicate with her directly, maybe an email, but it probably would go into a folder and she would never see it. Now they can just tweet at her and she can see everything. So the public feels emboldened too, that they have a voice, for better or worse, on whatever issue it is. So it's just a different environment. But trust is such a significant part of where we're at, and the trust in journalism is eroding. And so when I say we have to be careful not to become the story, we don't want to be, victims or whining about it and complaining about it. We just need to do our jobs, but act when it is crosses a line, and editors can figure out when that is.
Which really underlines the importance of having a well-balanced and representative workforce in the media. You say that the media is the public's eyes and ears. The public needs those eyes and ears to be representative, and it speaks to the importance of having women in the newsroom. Women have to be there to be part of the eyes and ears. I have another question from the audience, turning a little bit away from what we've been discussing, although it was still on the topic of sort of trends in the news media. The question is, how can we increase media literacy in South Asia? How can we educate people about fake news and protect them from misinformation? So I'll maybe ask Shereen to start on that one.
I think to start with, this is something that I'm particularly sort of just very, very, very consumed with, because what we've seen, and especially through the course of the pandemic, is literally every 30 seconds, you get something in your WhatsApp inbox, and people just naturally assume if it's on WhatsApp, it has to be the truth, and it is so far from the truth. And so much of our time every day is spent just doing that, is to say, hey, this is fake news, and we've been calling it out, we've been putting out clarifications. There's been so much of our time and energy that's been spent on that. And I think, you have to make sure that the underlying message to your reporters, to your producers, to your editors, to your camera team is that we have to ensure that the message is accurate, that the message is verified, that the message is credible. You have to verify your sources, double check your sources. We can be late, that's fine, but we should not be wrong, or at least the attempt should be to ensure that we are right every time we break a story. So I think that has to be the key driver as far as our newsroom is concerned. And you need adult supervision, which means that you need at least 2 or 3 pairs of eyes to look at what's going on. You also need to have a dialogue and a debate on a particular story. There can be different opinions, and then of course arrive at how you want to take that story forward, what angle you need to take. But I think there isn't enough due diligence that's being currently done in newsrooms, and I think it's important to reclaim that. And I think for us as leaders, that is something that we need to deal with very, very seriously. It's reclaim the credibility of news. I mean, people turn to us because they think if we're telling them something, then that's true, it's accurate, it's verified. And so we need to ensure that we're actually doing our goddamn job, or let WhatsApp do it, for us. And I think that's crucial to my mind. And I really hope, I think, as when I raise the larger issue of the existential crisis that the industry is faced with, I think this is one of the key problems. And there are no easy solutions to this, because we are living in a 24/7 live media cycle. There's information coming to you from everywhere. How much time do you spend checking something before you put it out? Can you afford to really be that late on the story? I think these are just everyday decisions that you have to make. But as far as I'm concerned, you have to prioritize the fact that your brand stands for trust, and your brand stands for integrity, and it stands for credibility. And I think those are things that we've built over the last 2 decades. And 1 or 2 wrong stories can shake the very foundation of that. So I think it's a reputational issue, and hence it's just something that we have to take very, very seriously.
There's the rise of sort of the citizen journalist has changed perspectives. That's what gives those WhatsApp groups, the Facebook groups, the various and sundry Reddit subreddit threads out there, that people are suddenly believing that stuff because they've lost confidence in what we would be sort of the mainstream media or legacy media. They've lost confidence in us for a number of reasons, in various and pretty much probably every country. So it's our duty and our responsibility to either get them back or continue to do what we believe is fair and honest journalism. Shereen talked about the 24-hour news cycle. It's, again, social media has changed things, but so too has that. So you're constantly in this, to use the proverbial adage, feeding the beast. And in that, things slip through because, you need to refresh, you need to get the clicks, you need to do all these things. I think that, in print, we have the luxury of a bit more time, but we too have a live website. We too are looking for those eyeballs. So I am, it doesn't matter what day it is, trust but verify. That's always, it's got to be your mantra, regardless of how exciting it is and how juicy it is, trust but verify. And then the second thing, I said it earlier on, and I know it's probably a gospel Shereen and her colleagues live by, is I'd rather be right than first. And it's easy to write a correction in the newspaper the next day, which by the way, no one reads, but I want to be right. I don't need to be first. And because frankly, I think that's really more a competition amongst us in the media. Who got it first? Who broke the story? The public doesn't give a damn, but just as long as it's right. And so I think certain events have happened over the past decade that has given sort of rise to this notion of, fake news. Fake news has been around for a long time. It's been around forever. Fake news is defined, in my view, as news you just don't agree with. So if you don't agree with me, I'm fake news. And so I think we can't use that as a crutch all the time, that, the public thinks that we're just dismissive of us because they think we're fake. I'm real. I'm very real, and I'm very here. And it's incumbent upon us to, yes, push back against that, Amanda, but also, do our job with trust but verify and earning the public's trust again.
A really important point, making the distinction between throwing the accusation of fake news around for legitimate news stories, as compared with the stories that are going around, as Shereen said, on WhatsApp, that are sort of purported to be credible but have no source whatsoever. Yeah. And the use of that term, fake news, has certainly become far more widespread than it can be to be useful. I think we have time perhaps for just one more question. And so to tie up our discussion about Canada, India, it's been really interesting to hear the perspectives from two different countries, from broadcast journalism and print media, but to see the commonalities running through that. And so to tie this up, I wonder if you could give us your perspectives. How do you think that more interactions between women journalists from different countries can help to enrich the representation of women's perspectives in the media?
Well, I think, it would be lovely to have more conversations between women, but I just think that we need a lot more conversation to happen between media organizations, irrespective of gender. And I think you see the power of that. I mean, when you see the International Consortium of Investigative Journalism do the kind of work that they do, 200 plus journalists across 100 countries producing some of the most impactful stories, that tells you that we are dealing with large problems. And it requires collaboration of people who are well-intentioned, who understand this business, who know their jobs, but they need to do it together. They need to come together. So I think, the power of collaboration, that's just one example. And I think it is important for us to be able to actually engage so that we can understand each other's points of view. We can, for instance, today in our newsroom, we're dealing with what's happening as far as the Russia-Ukraine crisis is concerned. We're dealing with it on how it impacts oil prices, what it means as far as India's oil import bill is concerned, what it means to India, because we've got about 18,000 students stuck there. Those are the angles that are relevant to us, but it would also be important for us to hear what somebody else. Adrienne, I would love to hear what Adrienne has to say on that, so that we can actually have a much more holistic, robust conversation around issues, as opposed to, again, the curse of the single story of just one narrative shaping the way that we view a story. And I think that is what, to my mind, is more important. And I think engaging with each other across different newsrooms in different countries, I think that just gives you so much more perspective on looking at issues, whether it's climate change or poverty alleviation or reopening schools, for instance, just exchanging ideas on good practices. I think all of that. So it would be great to have more women speak to more women to understand the challenges that we face and what we can do to navigate around those. But I think it's important that journalists across newsrooms collaborate and come together much more.
And I would agree with all of that. I mean, again, thanks to the High Commission for this opportunity. This is an extraordinary chance for us to have conversations. And we'd said in our discussions leading up to this that even though we're on two sides of the pond, we probably have very similar stories, very similar issues and challenges, because I think that's the same. It doesn't matter where you exist, where you live. Obstacles are the same. It's just how you manage them that's may separate many of us. But that said, I think that there are a number of very good global journalism organizations. I know I'm certainly part of it. I'm a member of the Canadian Journalism Foundation. I'm on the board. We collaborate with organizations, media organizations around the world for World Newspaper Day, for example. And, we see, global type stories that, as Shereen already mentioned, people will come together for some really impactful journalism that matters. And, I think that that's very significant and very important that we are ourselves a community, because often you feel very isolated in this world, even though we're a big group, but you can often feel like you're an island unto yourself. Yeah. So those open and broad lines of communication are so key and so critical. And again, I'm so privileged to be part of this, and I'm so happy to have met Shereen and all of you that have participated. Thank you.
Thank you both so much for your time. I can't tell you what a pleasure and an honor it has been to have this discussion with you today. You've obviously put a lot of consideration and thought into all of these subjects, and I think it's so much. It's such an inspiration for everyone on the line. Before we close, I would like to say that Canada is certainly an ally to the free press, and that we will continue, the High Commission will continue to be a convener. We do want to work with you. We thank you to all of the audience members who are with us from across Canada, India, Nepal, and Bhutan. I will conclude this discussion, our first ever media celebrity chat, Canada, India, And again, thank you to our panelists. It really has been an honor and a pleasure to have you with us.